Hello everyone, I'm recording this section right now because of the strike, but I will have my regular office hours on Friday, and feel free to email me if you have any questions in the meantime. But today we're going to be talking about Chapter 9, the short run. So far in the lecture and in the textbook, we've been talking about the long run model, which describes how the economy will behave on average. However, in the short run, the economy is very unlikely to be equal to its long run average due to fluctuations. And we can see that we can decompose the actual output as two different components. One is the long run trend or long run average, and the other is what we call the short run fluctuations. So if you look at the US GDP over the past couple of decades, you can see that it has a general upward sloping trend. However, it's not a smooth line because of short-run fluctuations, so we have ups and downs in the economy because of the business cycle. So the fluctuation, we're going to describe it as y tilde, and it's defined as follows. It's equal to yt minus y bar, the whole thing divided by y bar. So the reason why we want to use the difference divided by y bar is actually very similar to the notion of standard deviation. So yt and y bar, it's going to be different every year. So if we just compare this difference, yt minus y bar, from year to year, it's not a very good comparison. So we want to normalize it by the long run trend in that year so that we kind of get a sense of how big of this difference is across the year. So that's why we use yt minus y bar divided by y bar. And this short run fluctuation is also sometimes called the detrended output or the short run output. Okay, now let's take a look at the Phillips curve. And here I have a graph of the Phillips curve. On the vertical axis, we have the change in inflation rate. So pi is for inflation rate, and delta, the triangle, is to denote changes. And on the horizontal line, we have y tilde, which is what we just defined earlier. And on the right-hand side of this graph, y tilde is greater than 0. And under what circumstances will we get that? Well, if you look at the formula, y tilde is greater than 0 is positive when yt is greater than y bar, which means that the amount of output that we have right now is bigger than the average. So the economy is doing better than its long run average. And same thing on the other side, when y tilde is less than 0, we have yt is less than y bar, so we have a negative number on the numerator. And that means that we're doing worse than the long run average. Okay, so the reason behind studying for the Phillips curve is that we want to understand how the inflation will fluctuate due to the changes in the output. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the slope of the Phillips curve in a little bit. And we have something also called the Okun law, which is different than the Phillips curve. So recall that the Phillips curve described the relationship between inflation rate and short-run output y tilde. And here the Okun's law described the relationship between unemployment rate and y tilde. So y bar here is defined as the natural rate of unemployment. And the natural rate of unemployment is the frictional and structural unemployment over the number of people in the labor force. And U here without the bar is the total or overall unemployment rate. So that includes frictional, structural, and also cyclical. So U minus U bar, we're only left with cyclical unemployment. So that's what we have on the left-hand side. And the right hand side, we have negative 1 over 2 times y tilde. Once again, y tilde describes how far we are away from our long run average. And the relationship is negative because when we have a booming economy, we will have a positive y tilde because yt will be greater than y bar. In that case, unemployment should be low, so this number should be negative on the left-hand side. And on the other hand, when we're in a recession, y tilde should be less than 0. So we'll have a negative number times a negative number on the right-hand side, which will give us a negative number which will give us a positive number on the left-hand side, which makes sense because that means that we'll have cyclical unemployment. We'll have unemployment due to changes in the economy due to business cycle. Okay. And now we'll have an exercise on the slope of the Phillips curve. So draw a graph with a steep Phillips curve and also a flat Phillips curve. Explain how the two economies, so the one with the steep Phillips curve and also the flat Phillips curve, how they will respond differently to a boom and to a slump. And part B, what are some of the factors that might influence the slope of the Phillips curve? C asks you, do you think the slope of the Phillips curve has changed over time in the US? And consider the US in the 70s versus today. So I recommend you to pause this video before I go into the solution and try to work it out yourself and to see if you get the same answer as I do. Okay, so here I have a graph with two Phillips curve. So the blue line is the steeper Phillips curve and the red line is the flatter Phillips curve. And we're trying to understand what happens to the inflation rate when we have a change in output, like how that will be different in the blue lines and in the red line. So imagine we start out right here, where we have a positive y tilde, so the economy is booming. However, we experience a negative shock and we're all of a sudden in recession and we're all the way out here on the left hand side of the graph. And if you take a look at the blue line, you can see that it actually decreases really rapidly. So we'll have a very big change in the inflation rate because of how steep this Phillips curve is. Versus the right-hand side, we'll see a smaller change over time because the line is really flat. So the slope of the Phillips curve really captures how sensitive people are to changes in economic conditions. So imagine you're reading a newspaper and you know the economy has been growing at 2% each year, but then the New Year's GDP figures come out and it's 4% less than last year's. So in some of the economy where people are more confident about the economy, they probably think that, well, it's probably a very short-term temporary thing and it's not something that I need to worry about. So they wouldn't really change their, their regular habits. On the other side, if you have an economy where people are very sensitive to changes, because they don't really believe in the current government or the policy or like the foundation of the economy, they would think that, oh wait, this economy is not stable and now it's declining. I should save up my money so that I can be prepared for the future. So they would cut back their consumption because they expect the economy to be really bad in the future and they want to have money in the future. So they would decrease their consumption now, which will lead to a decrease in demand, which will push down the prices more. So in a case that where people are very sensitive to changing economic conditions, um, which is like the blue line here, they will react a lot more. Say in the example that I just mentioned, they will cut back their consumption a lot more, which will result in a greater change in inflation. And part C, it's asking you, do you think the slope of the Phillips curve has changed over time? This is a personal preference sort of question. You can try plotting the change in inflation and GDP over time. But there's no one right answer to this question because there's many ways where you can divide up the period to see if there's any changes, and also there's different ways to measure inflation and also output in general. So this is an open-ended question, but I highly recommend that you gather some data and plot the change in inflation and output to see what happens. Okay, and now we have an exercise on the Okun's law. Suppose the economy has a natural rate of unemployment of 5%, and suppose the short-run output over the next 4 years is 1%, 0%, -1%, and -2%. According to the Okun's law, what unemployment rate will we expect to see in this economy? And part B asks you, consider another economy in which the unemployment rate over the next 3 years is 6%, 7%, and 4%. According to the Okun's law, what are the levels of short-run output y tilde in this economy? And just as a reminder, this is the Okun's law, where it says u minus u bar is equal to -1/2 times y tilde. Okay, so we're given u bar in this example because u bar is the natural rate of unemployment and u bar is 5%. And we're given y tilde and we're trying to solve for u. So we can just plug the numbers into the formula. So we'll have u minus 5% is equal to -1/2 times y tilde, and we can just plug in what y tilde is for the next 4 years. And these are the answers for u. And B is the opposite of A. So instead of given y tilde, we're trying to find y tilde given u. And once again, u bar is 5%, and then we just need to plug in the different numbers of u in the next 3 years in order to find y tilde in the next 3 years. So that's all I have on chapter 9 regarding the short run model. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and thank you.